So I've been living here in Poland for 2 years now. I just wanted to reflect on some of the changes that I've noticed in myself and the things that I really appreciate about living in this country. And we're going to talk about a lot of very deep topics today, so buckle up. Let's talk about Polish family values for a second. This is one of the things that I love most about this country and why I believe it's a great place to raise kids. In a lot of ways, it is very similar to Latin America. And I didn't realize this as first, but when people would say that Polish people are like just snow Latinos, I think that's so accurate, to be honest. I believe a lot of them are like Mexicans because a lot of the men here are in construction work, are very handy around the house, and believe in more traditional gender roles, whereas the women were at home taking care of everything. They were, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids. But also this idea of the Catholic matriarchy, where the women can sometimes be extremely overbearing, have a little bit too much control in the house, and baby their boys and create mama's boys. I'm going to talk about this in a future video and go more in depth into it. And this stereotype exists in a lot of Catholic countries. For example, a lot of Latin American countries, it's very common, but also Spain, Italy, and the Philippines, where my family is from. And that's one of the reasons why I connect quite deeply with this country, because yes, I am Chinese, but specifically my mom's side of the family, they grew up Catholic. They all went to Catholic private school, just like a lot of people here in this country, and they have a lot of strong women in their family as well. And even though a lot of people now in Poland may not be extremely religious anymore, you can tell that the way the society is set up with how people view relationships and family dynamics come from the Catholic roots. And a lot of the problems that this country has, especially within relationship dynamics, are very common in other countries around the world that have the same Catholic structure. Poland does feel like a mix of America in the way that they value like work ethic, I guess, and capitalism, but also the way that they value family and religion and everything. It just feels like Latin America without the violence and with white people. I'm not gonna even lie. Coming from America, America is quite an individualistic society. And you can argue that in Poland, especially here in Warsaw, that culture is also pushed a lot. And I think the biggest pro of that is the ability to reach your full potential. But the biggest con of that is that when you're in pursuit of your personal dreams, you sacrifice community and what's good for the group. And I think that's why we have this crazy mental health crisis going on right now, because yeah, you can have all of this financial success and career success, but an important human need is the need for community and friends and having family around you. I think that's why a lot of Polish people don't like living in Warsaw, because it's like the most individualistic city, I believe, in the whole entire country, because it's a capital and everybody's trying to, progress and improve here. But one comment that I have made, and a lot of Polish people also feel, there's this tendency to feel very lonely here in Warsaw. And I actually totally agree with that. This is a feeling that I also felt when I was back in LA, where I came from, because everybody's trying to pursue their dreams and their career, and especially if there's a lot of financial pressure, because Warsaw is quite expensive, it causes people to take care of themselves and focus on themselves. And especially because here in Warsaw, a lot of people that live here in the city are not from here. So there's a lot of Ukrainian refugees or a lot of international people, because they speak a lot of English here in Warsaw. And you have a lot of people from the small cities coming to Warsaw to try to make it big and, satisfy their dreams, so to say. So you have a lot of transient people here. And because of that, I do find that it's hard to make long-lasting relationships. And this is one of the things I miss the most about Krakow, because just the vibe of the city was a lot more calm and a lot more, community oriented. And I made some of my best friendships when I was living in Krakow. And I have a lot of friends here and I have a community here for sure, but I don't think it's quite to the same level. Hard work does seem to be valued and pushed by the parents, which is something that I appreciate a lot. But also they have this Eastern mentality where causing trouble or causing a scene or trying to stand out from everybody is also kind of considered a bad thing, which can lead to some issues. For example, I find that Polish people can be quite envious of each other. There is strong societal pressure to conform. And this is one of the reasons why I believe Poland is also so safe. So, just like anything in the world, there's always pros and cons. If you guys are thinking about moving to Poland, if you're a Polish immigrant or from a Western country, you can set up an intro call here so we can talk about your situation to see if this makes sense for you. First off, I have to say that I think it's amazing that Poland has gotten quite viral over the last few years. Out of nowhere, it just seemed like a bunch of content in Poland was blowing up on YouTube for some reason, right? And I definitely took advantage of this boom and I made a lot of content and I built my whole entire channel around it. But you can see it now. There's a lot of other creators that are trying to come to this country, make content, take advantage of this boom. But I find that most of these creators don't have a very deep understanding of the country. Because I think there's like 3 different levels of people that live in a country. So you have the tourists that come through the country for a short amount of time. And then you have foreigners that come here who are either they haven't been living here for a while or they only live with like the expat bubble. Or what's even worse is that they've been living here for 5, 7, 10 years and still do not speak Polish, which bugs the heck out of me. You guys know I talk about that a lot on my channel, but it's surprisingly way more common than you think. I do my best to try to set an example on my channel and call out all these other people who are doing it. And I actually think because I've been applying a lot of pressure on my videos, I've noticed other creators are also stepping their game up and trying to learn Polish. As the saying goes, a rising tide lifts all ships. I just don't like people bullshitting me. Tell me the truth, and even if I don't agree with it, if I know it's coming from an authentic place, I have to respect it. But it really bugs me when people are trying to put up a front, or you can tell that they're lying, or they'll, make videos about the country when you know deep down that they're not integrated at all. They know nothing about this place, and they're just trying to cater to what they think Polish people want to hear instead of sharing their own actual observations. I came to this country and I stayed here because I love how Polish culture is. And it really makes me sad to see, especially a lot of Western foreigners who maybe come from America or English speaking countries. They come to this country, refuse to learn the language because they're arrogant and they think that they're a little bit better than the country to a certain extent. And then I believe the third level of foreigner is the one who learns about the culture, who speaks the language and has local friends. And that's how you can really feel integrated into the culture, because I feel like if you don't speak Polish, you only experience like 10% of the country. When you speak in your native language, that's like your true self, right? And obviously my native language is English. But when you interact with a Polish person, when they speak English versus when they speak Polish, it's almost like they're 2 completely different people. And when you get to see people who they really are, and when they're able to fully express themselves, that's when you can develop a lot deeper bonds. And I think that you can't really achieve that unless you speak the language to a certain extent. Now, when I go into restaurants, I can do that whole entire interaction in Polish, and I can more properly observe how people act, the relationship dynamic, how kids interact with their parents and vice versa. So let's talk about language. One of the greatest experiences that I've had is learning Polish. A lot of people say that Polish is a very difficult language, which it is. Polish is interesting because it has like the structure of like a Slavic language with the precision of a language like German, but with the emotional depth of a feeling like Spanish. And that's why a lot of Latinos that move here actually end up learning the language. From what I've noticed, the people that learn Polish are usually obviously the Russian speakers, so Belarusians or Ukrainians. Then you have Latinos, because believe it or not, Spanish is actually quite similar to Polish in a lot of ways. And I'll talk about that in a future video. But also Asians. I believe a lot of Asian languages are also very complex, but we also understand the importance of when we're in somebody else's country, it's also important to respect their culture and their language. Some people will say that they have different personalities in different languages, right? And I half agree with that. I don't think it's that you have different personalities. You just have different tools in different languages to express yourself differently. And also, depending on how you learn the language, it's almost like a second childhood. For example, when I speak English, normally I actually say the F word and I curse a lot because that's how I grew up in LA. But when I speak Spanish, I almost never say any curse words. I'm a lot more flirty and I talk with a lot more innuendos because the language allows that for you. But then now when I find myself speaking Polish, I find that it's like direct with a lot of flexibility. Like the base rules are quite strict, but there's a lot of freedom with how you can organize a sentence. I believe Polish is a very front-heavy language, but once you get a good amount of foundational stuff, you can actually communicate quite easily and people know what you're saying even though it's not 100% correct, which is one of the cool things about, the Polish language system. Languages also change how you think about things. Very perfect example of this is the difference between English and Spanish. of the word to be. In English, we just have to be, and that can mean I am like a certain way, or I'm just feeling something in the moment. In Polish, they use the same verb, just być, right? In Spanish, you have this idea of ser and estar, which separates things that are permanent and things that are temporary, such as emotions or location. It changes your perspective on how you view emotions. So for example, if I were to say, I am an angry person, I am depressed, that can mean that I am angry at this moment or that I'm just an angry person in general. There's no real distinction. And I actually think that's one of the reasons why people in the West get so caught up in this mental health stuff, because it's like, yeah, I am a depressed person, but just because you are depressed right now doesn't mean you're a depressed person. It can just be how you're feeling right now. Whereas in Spanish, you can properly express this with the word estar. Emotions are passing things. So even though you may be angry at this moment, it does not mean that you're an angry person. And because of the depth and flexibility of the Polish language, I've noticed that that also changes how the relationships are here. Something that I've noticed a lot is that, especially the younger Polish men, they're a lot more connected with their emotions, and there seems to be an overall societal culture thing where communication is like the fundamental of a relationship. And because Polish is such a deep language, it allows you to have these very deep conversations. A lot of people that I've met here actually come from divorced families, but what seems to be interesting is that a lot of them have good relationships with both of their parents, and even though the parents are divorced, they still have a cordial relationship. And that mutual respect for, partners and being able to talk through things, I think, is actually one of the most beautiful things about this country that we don't really seem to have in the West. All right, so now I want to talk about the political culture. The politics are quite polarizing here in Poland. If we were to take like the conservatives and the left-leaning parties here in Poland, they would still more or less fall into the conservative bubble in America, right? Because the country itself in general is quite conservative. And even the people on the left agree on baseline values that we would consider conservative in the West, but it's just normal here. No to illegal immigration. If you say that you're proud to be Polish, you're not considered like a racist or a white supremacist, right? It's just like a natural thing, which to me makes sense. Emphasis for societal order and safety. In America, that's seen as more of a conservative quality, whereas in many Eastern countries, this is just considered a baseline societal value. And you can even make the argument that the women here are extremely like feminist and empowered, especially in the big city like Warsaw. But I would argue that even though they do feel that way, they still value what a man provides and brings to the table to a certain extent. This is kind of a big topic though, because I'm doing a lot of research on it. I've been watching a lot of podcasts. One of my favorite ones is this one called Czasami Czuły, Czasami Barbarzyna. And then one of the feminist speakers that seems to be very popular is this girl named Barbara Struvash, something like that. I'm gonna make a different video about this in the future. But even the feminism here does not feel as extreme as the politics and the polarizing in the US, because every time I walk into the US, it's like you have to have an opinion on everything. You're being constantly shown like news, and people's political opinions are just shoved down your throat. You can't even be friends with somebody who doesn't share like similar political opinions to you. You can't even have an open discussion. America does feel like a pressure cooker in a lot of ways, where everybody's just so irritated all of the time, and the politics just adds an extra layer of like intensity. And I don't really like being in that environment. But America is so separated from the rest of the world that it's like they kind of live in this bubble. They don't have to really act with other countries the same way. And because English is also quite a simple, direct language, I think it really limits the perspective that you have about things. And that's why people say that Americans are very ignorant and closed-minded. And I think the language is one of the main reasons for that. Another big difference is how people on this side of the world view war. Because in America, we're shielded from a lot of the consequences of war. And our mentality for war is offense and foreign intervention. Whereas in literally almost everywhere else in the world, when people think of war, they're on the defense. They're trying to defend their homeland. They see the actual consequences of their actions and of war. So it's a completely different thing. I went to Ukraine a couple of years ago during the war to see what it's like. And when you're living in a country where alarms are constantly going off because a bomb could come and hit your country or where you're living, when you see the actual destruction of soldiers that came in and shot a bunch of people, killed a bunch of people, it just hits differently, right? Whereas in America, we can only see these things through social media, but we don't actually see it for ourselves. Something I really value about living here in Poland is their focus on stability and safety and order. As an Asian person, I relate to this a lot because I am totally okay with giving up a lot of personal freedoms if that means for an overall more harmonious and safe society. Whereas I believe a lot of Americans are actually not, because they are so attached to this idea of personal freedom. And the perfect example of this is Americans, their opinions on guns. Americans will defend their right to have guns fervently. It's also not a coincidence that America has so many shootings everywhere. You can have public shootings literally at schools or at a concert or at a church. You're not really safe anywhere. And if I were to tell you that, oh yeah, I'm living in a country where gun violence is so common, you can't really wear expensive things in the street anymore because you might get robbed. If you go into a pharmacy, all of the medicine are behind glass windows because people will go in and steal them. And you have like political assassinations that are common in your country. You would think that I'm talking about Latin America, but America is the exact same way. For example, Charlie Kirk last year, that guy just got assassinated out of nowhere. And every time I go back to the US, it just feels less and less safe. I'm just like, what's going on? Because America used to really value order and stability and safety, but that seems to be going away. So I personally really like living in a country where that is a main priority and guns are not very common here at all. Now, Poland is not perfect. They do have crimes, they do have killings, but it's so rare that when it happens, people are quite shocked about it. Whereas now when I hear of a shooting in America, I'm just like, okay, it's just a typical Wednesday, you know? And I would say by far my favorite thing about this country is their focus on free speech and humor. I love that I don't have to watch my tongue here. And as long as something is funny, you can pretty much say whatever you want. In America, people are always trying to tone police you. And it's funny because it's usually the white liberals that come from privileged background that try to lecture you on how everything that you say is offensive. And then we need to protect the minority classes, which I think is just very patronizing. But here you can say some of the craziest stuff, and as long as it's funny, everybody will laugh with you. And it's great because, you know, even when black people come here, when you try to pull the black card or the race card, that shit don't fly here because Polish people were equally as oppressed, if not more, than people around the world. But also the culture really values you to have like thick skin. And because, of course, the language is very communicative and very open, people here value dark humor a lot. And the more intelligent that your joke is, even though it's offensive, if it's funny, that is good enough. And that is kind of encouraged here. Humor brings people together. People are trying to have a problem with all of these racist jokes that you say, but racist jokes in a friend group are hilarious. And this is how men talk, right? You know, they often say that men will insult each other, but we don't mean it. Whereas women will compliment each other and they don't mean it. I personally want to give a huge shout out to Poland and this country because I believe that this country has given me a lot. Before I came to this country, I was recently divorced with my wife. I was in a good amount of credit card debt and I was wandering around Asia for a bit trying to get my life together. And I came to Poland. It provided me the stability that I needed to help organize my life. And also because my channel, you know, got quite popular here, it made me feel validated in a lot of ways because I always knew that the way that I presented information or made videos, there was an audience for it, but, you know, it wasn't popular in Colombia because most of the foreigners that go to Colombia go there for the women. But it's nice that I was able to make intelligent, thought-provoking videos. And here in Poland, it's a country that values that kind of content. So it was just kind of a match made in heaven. And I really believe that I'm here in this country and my success is contributed to God. You know, I don't think that there is an other explanation for why this country has been like a perfect fit for me. Really love what this country has given to me, which is why I respect it so much, which is why I respect the language and the culture so much. And it irritates me when people, you know, also try to take advantage of the country too. So all I can really say is thank you so much. Thank you to the Polish people who have embraced me, who continue to watch my videos. Thank you to the country for providing this level of safety and stability that allows people to be able to focus on the important things in life. And overall, I'm so happy to be here. Hopefully I can stay here for a long time and raise a family here. I would love that. There's nowhere else really in the world that I'd rather be. And I'm extremely thankful and I love this country a lot. If you guys are thinking about moving to Poland, if you're a Polish immigrant or from a Western country, you can set up an intro call here so we can talk about your situation to see if this makes sense for you.